All right, welcome to Mr. Miller's Woodshop podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Miller. Please make sure to rate and review these shows. I'm doing this to try to bridge the gap between industry and education. So please, let's get this out there. Let's be up on the big time boards of everything. So please rate and review. That's how we help navigate those algorithms so that more people get access to this content and what's going on in education right now. So you can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, of course. And today, what are we talking about? We're talking about teachers. So teachers, this is your guide to the first 10 days, all right? I run through my classes in about 10 days. After that 10th day, they're out working on their projects. Speaking specifically to woodshop teachers in a high school format, my classes are 67 minutes. I see them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And if your format is different, if you're at a different age level, you may need to add days, you might need to slow things. But my philosophy is as fast as I can get them out there safely as possible is the best way for them to learn woodworking. Now, I'll go through what each day looks like too, but I just want to kind of set the base here as I'm sitting here right now. It's middle of August, and I'm already getting emails coming in from my admin. We don't start until that Tuesday after Labor Day, so about September 3rd every year is when we start. And so this may look different too, as far as like, is this the beginning of the school year or is this the beginning of a different semester? Because it does kind of look different based on what to expect. If this is just a changeover in semesters, chances are you've done it before, and so just do it again and do it better. I've always tried to improve something that I do, even if it's a minor thing, every single time I teach it, and so take that opportunity to do that. My guess is that there's going to be a lot of teachers that listen to this at the beginning of the year. This is going to be the one that I send out to teachers who are just starting out, and hopefully there are more of them, whether you're coming straight out of college or you're coming from industry. Those first 10 days really set the tone. And I think there is an art to doing it well. I think that art is doing it efficiently. And so you're speaking fast, you're moving quick. There are a lot of teachers that value the patty cake games and the getting to know you shuffles and getting kids up. I think you hook those kids the first time they use a piece of equipment. So you kind of delay that. It's a backwards thought as far as like how teachers typically do it. The guy that I student taught social studies, and he was always hammering like, you don't get into the content the first week. Now, that's a great thing in a social studies classroom because that's how you hook those kids. That's how you get them. That's how you make them buy into what essentially you're selling. So let's just, let's start basically middle of the summer, okay, or we'll say middle of August. We'll say 2 weeks out because that's about where I'm at right now. So I'm looking at the emails that the admin have been sending. They've usually got a calendar set for what that first initial week looks like, and different districts do this better than others. And I'm in a district now that gives me ample time to work. In fact, I usually take a good hour and go to a grocery store nearby and load up my fridge. But that's because I'm coming up on my 10th year teaching, 10th year doing this. It's my 7th year in a wood shop, which is kind of funny to say. It still feels like I'm a rookie doing this, but I feel like I've got this down to a point where I run through this pretty well, and I'm trying to improve every year. But I didn't have anything like this when I started. I had a really good teacher that I replaced who was willing to talk on the phone with me every night, and so I'm just trying to replace that. And truth be told, I've done that for some teachers and will continue to do that for some teachers. But I want this to just be another resource in case I'm not available, in case you don't have a teacher willing to help you out. This is what my first 10 days look like. So those emails that come in, preparing you for what that first week looks like back, whether or not you've got students or not. Ideally, you don't, and so you have some time in your wood shop to get prepared. And it doesn't need to mean that it doesn't mean that every machine is ready to go day one when kids come in. That's the mistake that I fell into right off the bat. I thought that my screw bins needed to be organized. I thought that machines needed to be up and running, that blades needed to be sharp, and they certainly do once kids are going to be using them. But right now, your efforts should be focused into the logistics of dealing with 20 to 30 kids in a class. So for me, I have a binder for each kid, and they get to keep all their stuff right in my shop. And I'm not saying that this is the best way to do it. I think there's great value in having some responsibility built into there. But for an intro class, and even my advanced kiddos, I have them keep all their stuff there, so there's not the excuse of, I don't have this, I don't have my plans, I don't know where I left off at, I don't know if I have it cut out yet, because it's all there. All right, there's very little homework that comes out of my class. And so I've got the binder set up. I'll have all the stuff that I need printed out. We've got a safety release form that we send out to kids, so that'll be printed off. I'll have all my safety tests, paper version printed off. I'll have their project plans. I usually do a getting to know you on paper. I'll have a seating chart ready to go, and there's different theories on that. I just like having them spaced out so they're not by their buddies, because I don't spend a lot of time talking with them sitting. So if they're away from their buddies, they can work with them when we get going. But when we're sitting down, I'm gonna divide you on purpose, just to be mean Miller, and you can use that or something like that for that, because once they get through these 10 days, you get them, okay? And they don't care where they're sitting. They'll sit on the floor. They'll sit next to the table saw, because it's not going to be long for them to be sitting. So the first week, get time in your class, and that might mean asking for additional time, and hopefully you don't have to stay late. I did my first year stay late just to get caught up and get ready. But if you got kids at home, if you got family, like, go home to them. I'm a strict work to rule guy, and this last year our district union actually went work to rule, meaning you only work what you're paid for, and that was kind of like staying late for me, because I'm pretty much working to rule all the time. I mean, I've had so many hourly jobs where I punch in and I leave. It's not like educators where, they're kind of not expected, but it's kind of the norm where we come in early and we stay super late, and our families pay the expense for it. I'm not in that crew. I think the world of those that do. I mean, you're willing to stay late, come early, but I'm a dad too, so I'm heading home to them at 3:30. So don't expect anything returned after that. Anyway, guard that time. Guard that time in your classroom. Don't let it get taken away by people just coming in to get to know you, shooting the breeze. There's a lot of folks in education too. Their first week looks like a bunch of patty cake. And some of it is good. Like, let's meet the new staff. Let's do some fun activities. But then you get the complainers afterwards that talk about, oh, this is such a waste of time, and this was so boring, and why did we have to sit through that meeting? And you're really, it's even worse than the meeting. It's even worse than what you're complaining about, because now you're robbing my time and wasting yours. I look up to a teacher. It was my first full-time teaching position. He was my department head, and he was world class at this. But he would guard his time, because he had a lot to do in the metal shop, and I had a lot to do in the wood shop too, and I actually wanted more from him as far as guidance. But his biggest thing is, like, when the door closes, it doesn't matter what the department head or the principal say, or the superintendent for that matter. That's your class. So go teach it the best way that you know how to. And that was just a great philosophy. But what he was world class at was not getting tied into these complain-a-thons, or the people that just wanted to talk about their hunting trip or their summer vacation or show you pictures. Like, he would walk away from people mid-sentence, and he didn't do it in a rude fashion. He would just, make some sly comment, or like, oh, all right, well, better get working, or better get back to it, or I got a student coming in, and I'd come in like 10 minutes later after I was just having my ear talked off, and there was no student. No, I didn't want to sit around and listen to him complain about his gardener or something like that. So that's good advice that I got, and that I got to see, was that you need the time in your classroom. All right, so advocate for that. If you're a rookie coming in, it may not be you talking to the principal saying, hey, I need extra time. Will you get me an extra day? Will you pay me to be here on Friday? That's probably not going to be the case. I'm 10 years in, and I'm still not comfortable doing that. Some people are more willing to push the envelope, but at this point, I'm more suited to kind of do that under the radar. I've not signed up for things, hallway duties or cafeteria supervision, simply because I need the time in my classroom. I'm not just turning the lights on and organizing desks into rows. I'm fixing equipment. I'm making sure saw blades are sharp. I'm making sure that material is ordered. There's a lot more that goes on because there's not maintenance staff in these shop programs. It all falls on you. So if you want the program to run, you need to be that person, and you need the time to do that. So guard that time. So take care of that before kids come, because day one is a blitz. You're always going to have people that come late. So I won't even start right away. I just kind of keep tunes rolling the first 5-10 minutes so those stragglers can find the wood shop and come in. And then once I get them all seated, I show the seating chart so they can all find where they're supposed to be, because ideally, if your shop is set up like mine, you've got some lockers or some storage for students in the room. And so you'll want them to have that day one, at least have that access, because you'll probably tell them to bring tape measure, shoes, ponytails, things like that. And so you want them to, be able to set them up for success that way too. And I go through a whole day presentation of what my class looks like, and I could probably do that over a podcast here too, or videotape me given that. I've actually done that in the past, but it didn't turn out very good for YouTube, or actually it is on YouTube, but I mean it's pretty boring. I mean, I'm talking about what our vocabulary will look like and what the tardy passes and our smart pass app system to look like. Like it's pretty boring as far as like what other teachers would need to be listening to this. There's a lot of school specific stuff, but then also in my intro, I talk about my background, talk about my family more so than I do here, because I want them to know, like, when you email me at 6:30 and don't get a response, like it's not going to be a surprise that I'm with my family. So I get a picture, or if you're not a family person yet or don't want to be, like, it's okay to say, like, I build cars in my free time. I like to travel. I like to hike. Like, tell them about yourself, and that's pretty standard as far as any kind of teaching methods class. Like, they can understand that you're a human and that you don't live at the school, because you might even run into them if you live in the community. So day one looks like that. And kind of going back to my binder system, I'll actually have a vocabulary word or some sort of like process or systems thing to go over with them every single day. That's how I work in a lot of the OSHA and other safety stuff that doesn't directly affect their immediate time to get out to the shop. I kind of pepper that in that way, and other terminology and joinery techniques I'll pepper into that vocab, where it's usually 2 sentences. Kids sit down. Once the bell rings, they write down those 2 sentences off the board. I'll give some updates. I'll talk about it a little bit, but usually it's never more than 5 minutes. And I'm able to take attendance. I'm able to give any announcements if a machine is broken, or if we got another class coming into view, or some test coming up on Friday or something like that. I mean, that's the only test that I give are vocab tests, and I have them write up word for word on the test from what was on the board. So I build in some discipline, and I'm not shy about doing that. I think it's a good thing for them to be disciplined. It's only 2 sentences, so it's about the easiest test they take in their entire high school career, because the tests are also open book. They can use the binders that stay in the room. So the folks that are failing this test really have to truly try to fail these tests. End of the day one, I try not to talk bell to bell, but that usually does seem to happen because I'm excited, and I usually get crickets whenever I ask questions or try to do a discussion or try to do some activity. But I usually leave some time, and I'll tell them, if there's 10 minutes left of the class, like, I'm done. You guys can wander the room if you want, and you'll get, it kind of is varied time to time. I'll get 1 or 2 kids that wander, and look at some of the saws, but most of them now especially will just park in their seats and check their phones, and I don't blame them. If it's late in the day and they've had 4 other syllabuses thrown in their face, like, I don't blame them for just wanting to check out, and so I give them some grace there that first day. But I also make sure to tell them, like, day 2, come ready with your binder, because we're learning the table saw. And I'll actually take days 2 and 3 to teach them about the table saw. The table saw, I think, is the most dangerous thing that I have in my shop. I mean, you can make arguments every which way, but we use the table saw most often for our machining, for our pieces, for cutting up our stock, and I'm sure a lot of you guys do too. So I think a table saw is a good one to start with. That first day, I don't tell them about saw stop. I go over kickback. I go over the entire safety test, question by question. In fact, after I go through their test and we've kind of gone over the whole gist of things, I do this. This is out of form, out of character for me, but it really gets them that second day. And I stole this from my shop teacher, is that I'll actually leave the room for a minute. And before I do, I'll tell the kids, like, all right, I've got a kid that I've asked to wait out in the hall, and I'm going to go get him. And he doesn't know any of this. You're going to have to teach it all to him and bring him through his first practice cut. And it's really kind of a gas kind of thing. I usually leave when it's quiet and there's a drinking fountain right outside the hallway, so I'll quick go get a drink, come back, and if I'm really feeling creative, I'll put a hat on sideways, pop my collar, walk all swagged out, and, like, hey, I'm Bobby. I'm the new kid. And Miller said, you guys are going to teach me this machine here. And you usually get some, like, it's a total dad joke. I mean, I'm at the point now where it's all dad jokes, but it's, you get some buy-in. And what I really love is that I go through, like, I make them tell me how to cut a piece of wood. I'll have a piece there. I'll have a tape measure, safety glasses there. And I'll make jokes about, I don't need safety glasses. I got performance eyelids. And I'll ask a question about, like, how do I set the fence? And, someone will holler out, but then one kid will raise his hand real bravely, and I'll pick on that kid, and I'll say, how do you do it? And he'll start laying it out, like, you want the tang of your tape measure up against the fence, and you measure from the inside of the blade so that you avoid that blade curve. And the whole time that student is talking, explaining that process to me, I'll pull out my phone, and then there's usually a couple of kids that just roast me on it, and it's like, hey, put your phone away. And I'll say, like, I was texting my mom, which is a big refrain that kids give when you give them grief for being on their phones unnecessarily. They'll be like, I'm texting my mom. So I just kind of play that right at them. And you usually get a couple class clowns that will intentionally tell you the wrong thing to do. And, I'm pretty good at heckling them back, as kind of this persona of Bobby, the new kid. And I used to not like that because, like, okay, you're not doing what I asked, but these kids know the right answer, but their goofy teenagerness lends them to tell me the wrong answer because they want to see me get a kickback. They want to see me get my hand in the blade. They want to see me, do wrong, but they know the answer. And so I'll say towards the end of the whole spiel, after I make the cut correctly, I'll say, now, like, you guys knew the wrong answer to every question. When you are up here, are you going to know the right answer? And they almost always nod their heads, yes, I will, yes, oh yes. Because it's no grief for them, or it's no grief for them for me, but for them it's going to be important, so they'll know it. So that's that first day out into safety training. That'll be the second day. The third day, I stay on the table saw. So let me back up here. Day one, I got the intro, talking about vocab. Day two, it's a full day on the table saw. Don't talk about saw stop. And a lot of kids, too, as we go over the kickback logistics, I actually show a video of this guy demonstrating kickback intentionally, and it's hilarious. But I leave them with that. Day two ends with that video of a kickback, and I let them... And I usually have a kid demonstrate on the table saw too, with me hand over hand, and I kind of have them do the same thing for Bobby, the new kid. Like, I have them tell them, like, what to do so that the kid doesn't have to think. And that's really exciting for them to see a student the second day of class make a cut. And if there's time, I'll do 2 or 3, but I want to make sure I show that kickback video. And I'm welcome to send that to anybody. I would make my own kickback video, but I'm not paid enough to do that. So I let this goofy guy online demonstrate kickback for my classes. Third day, I stay on the table saw. I talk a little bit more about the cutting sheet stock, cutting longer stuff, and I start the day off by my word of the day. That third day, in fact, is saw stop. And so I have a spent cartridge with the blade, welded to that cartridge brake, and Pass that around. Kids can see it. They laugh because I pass it around and I say, be careful, it's sharp. And it's, well, of course it is. It's a saw blade. And they're able to see that. I show the guy putting a hot dog through the table saw and the brake working, put his finger through the blade. It works. He keeps his finger. And that brings down a lot of nerves. And so I'm able to talk about those more intricate things on the table saw then. And then I leave enough time towards the end of the class for everyone to get a couple shots at those tests. And all my tests for safety are on Google Form. I think that's the best way to manage it. And they're self-grading, which is sweet. And they're ones that I just developed with some other teachers. This is one area I would like to collaborate with. So if you've got an awesome test, preferably in Google Form, so I don't have to write it out again, that would be great. Just because I just kind of go over the realities of it. I borrowed a lot from the Woodworkers Guild of Minnesota, what they do, but I've also adopted some things because my district requires a little bit more than just the common sense. And so it's so common sense at times that it's too common and uncommon and okay, I can't take this blade guard off ever. What if I keep the riving knife in? What if I'm cutting something really small? What if, right? And so I kind of gear more towards the practical, yet cover your rear on these tests. And so I make them get 100%. I make them take it as many times as they need to get 100%. I'm Mean Miller on this, and the justification I have for that is okay, let's say it's okay for you to miss 2 questions on a test because you're on a IEP or a specialty program or some plan that gives you the opportunity to miss a few questions yet get a passing grade. Whenever they say that, okay, if 2 questions is wrong, point on your hand, which 2 fingers are you willing to lose? And they're usually crickets after that. And I've gotten admin support on this, and a lot of parents, when I explain it to them this way, they're like, oh, okay. So my plan doesn't really, and you can retake it as many times as you want without fail. As soon as you guys pass all these safety tests, then we're good. I put it in the grade book, and you guys are ready to go. So that third day is about half on the table saw, talk about saw stop, and then half on the test. So they get a couple shots at it, and ideally they get to actually pass out the test. They've passed the test is what I'm trying to say. And other things on the third day is while I'm kind of giving that demo with them kind of seated around the table saw, I kind of run out of stuff to say, and I got more time than I want for the test. I'll let a couple other kids demonstrate on the table saw, and that counts as their practice cut. I'll talk about practice cuts at the end here. But day 1 is intro. Day 2 and 3 are dedicated to the table saw. That 4th day usually comes on a Monday or a Friday, dependent on whatever kind of festivals or pet fests your school has, or if you start late or start on a Tuesday or Wednesday. After Christmas break or something. Miter saw is a really good one on Mondays and Fridays because kids are usually missing that day, and that's the machine most students have had access to or at least have seen. And for me, I think it's the most easy one to teach because you hold it tight to the fence, tight to the table, and keep your hand out of the danger zone and make that cut. And I've got a double compound sliding miter saw that's battery powered, and so I've got a pretty advanced setup. Yet I'm able to get through it in a day. I give them about 15 minutes at the end for the test. And word of the day that day is talking about, it's either the miter saw or I'll talk about lumber grain direction so they understand the difference between a rip cut and a cross cut. And I'm willing to share those out for anybody who wants those. So that's day 4. Day 5, I'll talk about a joiner. Or if you've got a planer, that would be a good day to talk about that too. That's the one where you kind of make the joke, if you lose your finger in the joiner, you ain't getting it back. It's not getting sewed back on, But this is one that most people haven't gotten the opportunity to use, yet it's used all the time in the woodworking industry. And so I go through the test. I don't do any cutesy stuff for this one. I've at times had that joiner kick back on me during these demonstrations because I used to think it was a brilliant idea to demonstrate how to joint end grain. And I was using a rather thin board too, and so it shot out of my hand. And that was really, you don't want that to happen. And so I would get some, each time you're doing some of these demos, if you're not coming from the industry, coming from a big woodworking background, like test this stuff out first. That's the stuff you're working on, not doing the organization you maybe want to do, but get yourself acquainted with the machinery. Even if you've used joiners all your life, like use that one that you're going to be demonstrating on in front of 25 teenagers. So day 5 is very similar. I'll talk about the joiner, give them enough time for the test, and at this point, the lectures are getting a lot shorter because there's less involved from what I do. I used to try to video supplement just to kind of kill the time and get some more input from people, but I've kind of lost faith in those videos because it's basically just an echo of what I said, and I want to give them time for the tests. We usually get a crowd that is not the test-taking crowd, so that if they can basically have that time in class to test out, they don't have any excuses. I let my students take these tests at home if they don't have the time, because I really view the test as your knowledge upstairs. Like, you understand this, but for anybody who's gone through this in the last 10 years, you probably remember, like, okay, yeah, we talked about it, and then when you turned that table saw on and you saw that blade spinning and that motor humming, you forgot everything. So I value the tests. They're important. They're necessary for keeping your job in an accident, to show that, yes, this student did know the right process. But you got to keep in mind, too, that this is not the end-all, be-all. So I'm just going to quick run through these next 2 machines that I hit on. So we have a wide belt sander in my wood shop, and other classes or schools will use drum sanders, and I use these things all day long. My time saver will run from pretty much the moment my classes start until the time I leave at the end of the day. And so I need them to be efficient on it. So I talk about having multiple pieces ready to go, work with multiple students, the logistics of running this thing continually, matching up with students whose boards are similar thickness. I got a lot of examples too of kids getting hurt on the time saver too. So I'm able to tell those stories to kind of like remind them there is danger here. All right. But here are the ways to mitigate that. So I'll go over some of those stories with them, and some of them are kind of comical. One boy had his finger squished under a board because that roller pinched down on that infeed belt, and his ring got misshaped, so he wasn't able to pull it off. And so we had to go down to the principal or the nurse's office, and we had to wait a little bit, and then it swelled up, and he couldn't get the ring off at all. And the boy was kind of freaking out about it and still in pain, and he was kind of crying too. So he was kind of, I felt for him. I really felt for him, even though he was the kid that did not listen. He did not heed any advice. He knew it all. And like I hate to say that they deserve it, but like this is the candidate that would be your candidate for an accident if there was one to happen. So we finally get seen by the nurse, and the nurse has seen this a million times and says, "Oh yeah, it looks like it's swelled up. We're not going to be able to get it off. We'll have to cut it off." Well, and that boy's like first reaction was the finger. He heard the nurse say that we're gonna have to cut your finger off, and so he quick went white, and that was like, oh my God, okay, I saw that. And so I said, no, she's talking about cutting the ring off. Your finger will be fine. And he just, oh my gosh, okay. So stories like that on the wide belt sander are fun to tell, and just go over that logistics piece, because you're going to have to gear to your first 10 days and the machines you talk about too with the machines that you'll use first for your project. Because I sometimes will actually end on the wide belt sander and have kids start with their practice cuts that next day, because I would do a bandsaw demonstration, lecture, and test. But at times, my classes, I want them getting going before Christmas break, before I lose them. So I delay giving that test and giving that lecture until we're right about the time to use it. And so I value that as kind of being my flex and seeing how the students are reacting and how I'm doing too. At that point, I have talked essentially bell to bell for a whole week in a row. And I'm not the guy to talk for more than 5 minutes, and so I'm usually spent by then. So sometimes it's just playing Mr. Lazy. I don't want to talk. I'd rather just get out to the shop. And so I delay that bandsaw lecture and test. But the bandsaw is heavily used, and a lot of my students will actually have used that in middle school. And so a lot of times that one is mostly a review one, so it's good to come last. It's usually a lecture that I can knock out in about a half hour, so they get a good 30 minutes to do that test and any other tests that they have missed the prior day. Because after day 7 would be the bandsaw. Just a quick recap. So day 1 is the intro. Days 2 and 3 are table saw. Day 4 miter saw. Day 5 joiner. Day 6 wide belt sander. Maybe day 7 bandsaw and test. But then after that, I have my students do practice cuts, and I want them to do 3 practice cuts in a row. And I kind of set them up for success on that first practice cut. I'll make it easy. I'll say, I want you to cut something that's 11.5 inches long by 3 inches wide, something real easy. You don't even have to really even think with the tape measure all that much. And I don't have them run it through the planer or through the wide belt sander for finished thickness. It can just be whatever thickness it is, because I want them to get a lot of experience on the table saw and miter saw before I turn them loose onto their project. So that first practice cut, I tell them too, it's mandatory that I got to be by the table saw with you. I'll put my hands on your hands. I'll show you where they got to go, show where your feet go, and I'll be there to catch the board for you at the end of the saw when you make that first cut. This is usually my favorite day of the whole school year, because I see that kid with high anxiety, the fear in the kid's eyes just melt after that first cut. It's that feeling after you give the speech in high school, like, oh my God, it's done. Thank God it's done. That really wasn't that bad. And I usually will say that, like, wow, that was textbook. Good job. That wasn't so bad. And yeah, okay. And at that point too, where I'm turning the class loose, I've got maybe 5 or 6 go-getters per class. If I got 25 in a class that are ready to go, that they're done with the tests, all 5, 100%. They got their release form, their deposit form signed, like they're ready to go. And so I can hone in on those 5. And we're making noise. I'll turn some music on so it's kind of upbeat in there while we're making those cuts. And I'll just kind of dance. We've got 3 table saws. I'll dance between the 3. If a student's ready to go, I'll check their measurements, show them where their hands go, and they're ready to rock and roll. Because that first one, I have to be there. If I'm not accepting it. It's kind of, I don't follow through on that, but that's the big bluff that I give them, because I tell them I'm going to collect their practice cuts. Reality, I don't. So it's possible too that you could skate by and totally not do them. But at this point, in just my experience, I'm able to kind of see, okay, this student has just sat in the corner looking down the whole time, like, let me check in on them. And so usually during those first few moments of practice cuts, I can check in with those kids. And I used to be a real jerk and, I wouldn't holler at them or anything, but I would just really try to light the fire under them with some negative feedback and just like, come on, we got to do this. I don't want to get principals involved. I don't want to get parents involved. Now I just kind of say, hey, it's way more fun over here. Like, let's get this wrapped up. You know how to take a test. Let's get this wrapped up, and you can join me. And I've found a lot more. Just my teaching method suits itself to that strategy a lot better than getting the negative reinforcements out. There's times where I still do, if it's been a week or 2 weeks and they're still just, oh, I'm still working on that test. I'm working real hard on it. And like, no, you're not. Like, let's get this in order. And sometimes it's fear, or they'll say, oh, I don't have my deposit form, it's the money for the class. And I'll say, that's okay. You're done with everything else. You're making a cut today. And, I'm not, making it like you have to. I was like, okay, that's fine. Because they're usually kind of using it as my out. Like, oh, I don't have to do that today because I have the slip in my backpack, but I'm just not going to give it to them. And I've had it in times too where I'll have a kid go through and make a cut with me, and then they're like, actually, hey, I think I might have that in my social studies folder. And that's like right on top of their bag. Like, okay, you just were a little bit nervous. That's okay. And I'm there for the first practice cut for every kiddo. The second practice cut, I'll be a little bit more particular. I'll want something like 9 3/4 by 2 11/16 by 3/4 thick. And I just make these numbers up off the top of my head too, by the way. But I'm kind of being strategic too, because I talk about the machine minimums on all of the tests. And so I don't want kids running through the table saw with boards less than 10 inches. And so if you go and cut that first cut to length at 9 3/4, like you can't use this. And I'll say like, oh, that's okay. We're working with scrap right now. We're not working with that beautiful quarter sawn white oak that you're going to use for your project. And they kind of get a kick out of that. And sometimes they're so conditioned too in a government school, public school, that they're like, am I going to lose points for this? I'm like, no, just throw it in the tinderbox and go grab another piece. It's like, come on, we got to figure this out. It's like I'm a coach at baseball practice. Like, you threw a ball, now let's throw a strike, if they're a baseball person. So practice cuts are really fun because they lose that anxiety. I don't spend more than 3 days on them. If they are someone who is kind of milking it, like I'll say, like, okay, your next practice cut is going to be your side aprons on your project. And that third practice cut, I'm upright and telling them, like, I'm setting you up to fail. I'm setting you up to make a mistake, because I'll have the length actually shorter than the width. And so they got to think about things like, which way is the wood grain going? I'll have it written in kind of a funny way. I might have it in a decimal point. I tell them, like, I'm just trying to be a jerk here. I'm trying to get you to learn the most complicated way. It won't be this way on your project plans, but like, let's learn this. Like, some people go by decimals, and I usually never go metric system, but sometimes I've done that in the past too. Or I'll want them to make a piece that's 3/4 long by 3/4 wide by 3/4 thick. And so they have to really kind of strategize, which machine do I go to first? Do I go to the miter saw? No. Table saw? Maybe. Well, what about the wide belt sander? That one's at the longest minimum length. And so they kind of come up with this order of operations. And it's just the suggested order of operations, because you'll get a kid that figures out, like, I can go to the table saw first on anything and then just go to the wide belt and planer after. And like, that's great. All right, you've hacked the system. You broke the code. Now, let's keep that efficiency when we're actually going, when we got all 25 and this machine is up and running. So that's basically the 10 days. I'll recap this again. Day 1 is intro. Days 2 and 3 are table saw. Day 4 is miter saw. Day 5 is joiner. Day 6 is wide belt sander, drum sander, planer, whatever you want to call it. Day 7 is the bandsaw. And then you've got 3 days of practice cuts. After that, you've hit 10 days into the trimester, and that's when I give them their, or I let them go on their project plans. At this point, everybody is at kind of a different spot. You might have kids that first day of practice cuts, finish them, and they're on to their project that next day. That's where I find the QR codes so necessary for them to see that demonstration when they're ready for it. Those high flyers are not held back with this method. Those students who need to see that day 1 intro video again, I've got that linked on YouTube. All my safety lectures are on YouTube, and kids can have that. I've got those QR coded right by the door, so when they walk in, it's a big old flyer in their face. Miss a day? Here's the playlist for the safety lectures. And I'll have kids too that will kind of use that as their out of, like, I don't want to work today, so I'm just going to watch this 45-minute lecture on the table saw. Like, no, come on, no, that's not okay. Let's do this. You and I, let's pass the test first, and then we'll go through, and it'll be a private tutor. It'll be one-on-one instruction. There won't be anything better that you can receive educationally than one-on-one with the teacher who knows what's going on. And so be that teacher. Make it happen for your kids. I think structures and systems are important, but I think you as the teacher need to be the most flexible one for these kids, because it might be the point too where someone comes in day 7 and a counselor says, hey, can they join this? They just transferred here. It might not be your first year. It might not be your third year, but get this stuff online, get it digitized so that they've got the resources to catch up. I've got colleagues and have worked with people that say, like, if they miss those first 5 days, they cannot transfer into my class. And that could, be the thing that sours them on working with their hands for the rest of their lives. And I don't want to be that. I want to be that flexible teacher and that person that can go above and beyond, because I've created this this system where it can be flexible and we can get her done, because it's really fun. Like I kind of think I work 30 days a year, and I have 3 trimesters. That's why I say that. And the first 10 days are really the only days I feel like I work, because that's my heavy instruction days. I need to be there for them. I'm there for them every day of the year, just in case my admin is listening to them. But once the class is going, they're in the driver's seat. You are out of their way. They can use the equipment. They can ask you tips and pointers. And it's not like I'm hanging out in my office drinking coffee. Like, I'm mixing it up. I'm helping with problems. Hey, I got a knot right here. Can I put a pocket hole through here? All right, well, let's take a look. Let's problem solve this together. And that's what you can be doing. Things like that. And, of course, the classroom drama, behavior issues. You got classes coming through, or you got assemblies going on. Like, you can be flexible in that regard too. So that's what my first 10 days look like. It's an imperfect system, but it does work for me, and I've gotten a lot of success out of it. And so if you're a new teacher, or if you know a new teacher who's teaching a wood shop, please share this with them. If you're an admin or someone in industry listening to this, like, share it with your schools, share it with your teachers. I think it will be effective. If any colleges are listening to this too, feel free to use this as a resource. I don't need any money from it either. I want this to help another teacher. I just burned probably close to an hour with the notes that I took before this, and I'm not editing this, so I've wasted about an hour of my life. So please don't make it wasteful, make it useful, and be sure to rate and review this on wherever you're listening it on. I'm on YouTube now, which is kind of fun. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and I'll see you guys next week. Thanks.